Welsh Dragon, our flag, Ddraig Goch, is really distinctive. You can recognize it anywhere. I mean, this fierce dragon, you just know it out of any flags. Most flags are like just 3 stripes or something, but Wales, we have something quite distinctive. This is ben.llywelyn, welcome to the channel. We're talking about this flag today, and this dragon especially. Where did it come from? Only 3 countries in the world have a dragon on their flag: Bhutan and the Far Orient. Malta, which is St. George killing the dragon. I mean, that's not very nice. And ours, Wales, in which it's quite a big thing, and it's quite Eastern in appearance. It's not something that looks like it comes from the West, is it? I mean, you could argue that, maybe. But I want to make the claim that this dragon probably comes from the lower Danube region or the Ukrainian steppe region originally. And that there's social reasons why it came here and why it persisted and grew as a symbol. Most people don't know that this flag has only been the flag of Wales since 1959. And even then it was quite contentious about what it was going to be. The green and the white came from the Tudor dynasty, which I'll get to in a moment. Our flag from 1953 to 1959 was this flag. Not bad. I kind of like the pomp of the royal badge and the Welsh motto, but I do believe simpler is better. This has been our flag ever since. And before that, about the Tudor dynasty, this green and white was their symbolism. And when they used the Welsh gentry essentially and stole our prophecy, I have a video about that, they used the red dragon and unfurled the banner of Cradle, which I'll get to in a moment, on the field of Bosworth after their victory. And this became a boast of ours, you know, this banner was used to proclaim our victory. But before this, you had Owain Glyndŵr, and he used a golden dragon. Where did that come from? And this is what I'm getting at. This symbol has changed and transformed over and over through the centuries. It continues to as we go further back into this story. Because before him, there was a man named Geoffrey of Vynwy in the 12th century. And he mentioned that King Arthur had used a golden dragon, but that a red and white dragon, these two, were fighting under the earth, the Saxons and the Britons, basically. And that we would come to our day in victory over these Saxons. And Geoffrey of Monmouth, probably got this from Nennius, who wrote in the 9th century, talking about the red dragon of the Britons, that it was going to overcome the white dragon of the Saxons and we would reclaim our island. And where did he get this? Well, before him in the 7th century, a king, Cadwaladr, who reigned quite a long time from 655 until 682, used this symbol as his royal announcement of his ambitions and claims, because his father, Cadwaladr, had reconquered North England for about a year and a half, because their descendants claimed this land. North England and South Scotland were all Welsh-speaking quite late and held on to that inheritance and belief, or at least we did in Wales, that we had a right to it. And so Cadwaladr aware that his father had come so close to regaining these lands for our people. He wanted to make the claim that he still understood that and claimed that as his inheritance. And the reason why he would have chosen the Red Dragon is because kings before him had been called dragon before. He was channeling in to something older. He didn't just come up with this out of the blue at the time. I mean, maybe he did. That's an argument. But he chose the Red Dragon because there were already legends of dragons in relation to Welsh rulers in North England and southern Scotland. The word for dragon in Welsh is Ddraig. Ddraig. It's feminine, so Ddraig, it mutates. But this word is a bit unusual in its ending, because this G ending after a long vowel kind of sound, it means that it was between vowels, right? And this probably comes from Latin Draco. That's important. The name for the dragon itself in Welsh, Ddraig Goch, the Red Dragon. There had been earlier rulers before Cadwallon and Cadwaladr, calling themselves Ddraig, or at least their poets in propaganda, saying that they were these fierce dragons, kind of shorthand for a ruler, but tapping into some kind of older tradition that we're not sure what of it has survived. One of these rulers was Maelgwn Gwynedd, ruling Gwynedd in the early 6th century, really the first king to reap the fruits of his earlier family's reconquest, who had came down from Scotland and just north of Hadrian's Wall. And he was called Ddraig Goch. Now this could be in reference simply to Ynys Môn, the island off the coast of what is modern-day Gwynedd. Or it could be in reference to a wider claim, the Ddraig of the whole island of Britain. In any case, up in the north, you had Irian Rheged, and he was called Ddraig Hyllau, or Hyllau Ddraig, meaning experienced dragon in battle. And look at where he is. He's up in this Cumbrian lowlands of Scotland region. Take note of that for later. According to Vegetius, writing in the 4th century, a Draco was carried by the cohort in the Roman legions. This was fully incorporated into the Roman military structure. It was no longer explicitly Dacian, though there was that connotation, there was an echo there, but it was changing. Shifting to the other side of the continent, by the time that Rome came to Dacia in the east, these cultures were already thousands of years old, and they had acquired or inherited motifs, legends, mythical creatures from earlier civilizations in present-day Iran, Iraq, Turkey. The dragon or serpent-like winged creatures, we had seen these thousands of years before at that point. In Nebuchadnezzar in around 600 BCE. And these Babylonian civilizations, they bloomed influences into Central Asia. And you had groups emerging into new kingdoms, Parthians, Sarmatians, and later the Scythians, and these began to push west. This dragon idea erupts out of the western steppes of present-day Russia and Ukraine. And the Dacians, they're on the periphery of this world. They're being influenced by this. And we're not sure if the Dacian Draco is a native construct, or very likely they took it from the Scythians who were pushing out the Sarmatians, and the Sarmatians being pushed west. A Greek military writer, Arian, says these are Scythian. He says the Scythian banners are dracontes, held aloft on standard-length poles. They are made of coloured cloths, stitched together, and from the head along the entire body to the tail they look like snakes. When the horses bearing these devices are not in motion, you only see the patch-coloured streamers hanging down. During the charge is when they most resemble creatures. They are inflated by the wind, and even make a sort of hissing sound as the air is forced through them. They began to be recruited into the Roman military and as well the Dacians. It appears that this Draco, this serpent-like creature, comes into Europe through that and up through the Danube river valley. Dacia was quite old by this time, and you had Decebalus, who was leading wars against the Romans, and this symbol appears to carry royal significance. It becomes almost the banner of the nation that's leading this fight against Rome. And remember that name, Decebalus. It's important for later. And they don't win these wars, but they're not just wiped out immediately as a people. That cultural inheritance is not simply forgotten, and the Scythians are still there, and the Sarmatians to a lesser extent. But you don't want these men in this newly conquered land to be rising up in rebellion, do you? No. So what do? Because you have all these provinces, you conscript them into your legions and ship them across the vast empire to fight for you, rather than risking them gathering together and fighting against you. Many of our young men in Britain were shipped to Dacia, and vice versa, they came here. Sometime between 117 and 125, Emperor Hadrian raises a cohort, Cohors Prima Alia Decorum, the first cohort of the Dacians. Most of the men recruited into this would be Dacians, and this cohort would continue over the next 3 centuries or so. A new fighting unit within a legion, essentially, and they're quickly dispatched to Britain in 125. Now, where this cohort was stationed is important, because in the year 125 it was sent to what is Bewcastle, in Latin Vanum Cocidi, and this would have probably come from a Brythonic root. When the Romans conquered areas, they didn't always just give it a Latin name. They took the native name and just Latinified it slightly. That was happening in most cases. And in Welsh, this today would likely be Man a Corchthiw, the sacred place of the Red God. There were different cults working in this, and the Dacians who were brought here gradually assimilated the native religions. A year later, they moved just down the road to Bana, Burdoswald today. Bana in Welsh would mean hilltops, mountaintops, Banai. And this is just north of a mountain ridge where you can see the different Banai. So that's clearly what it is. And they were here for quite a long time. from 126 to at least 276. And during this time at Banai, a lot of remains remain, which echo these serpent-like, dragon-like creatures. We get carvings of Dracos. We get curved swords and tombs of the Dacian model. These people are proud of their inheritance as they're slowly becoming Romano-British. In the middle of the 3rd century, approaching 150 years after they've come here, there's memorial stones in this place at Banai to 2 children who must have died in an unfortunate incident. And their names are peculiar. Blasis is one of them, and the other is Dicabolus or Dicabolus. These are Dacian names. Explicitly one of them named after that famous king I mentioned earlier. And so this cultural inheritance is intact, certainly, in the 3rd century. And if they're naming children after their own inheritance, it makes sense that they would still have an identity with this symbol, this serpent dragon symbol. After this, they fall out of the record, this cohort of Dacians, but they come back in again. Around the year 400, we get a book called Nototia Dignitatum, the list of the offices, and what this is a detailed organizational structure of the Western and Eastern Roman Empire, and in it we get a reference to cohors primalia decorum being stationed still along Hadrian's Wall. So we know it's here just before Rome leaves. And they're stationed at Camboglana. And in Welsh, this is almost a direct translation. Camaglanai, meaning the bend of the riverbanks. And that's what it looks like in the topography. That's what it is. And so these soldiers of a Dacian heritage are in an area where the place names being taken into Latin are a direct translation of British. And as Rome leaves in the next decade, there's an eruption of British warlord kingdoms that emerge, and going back to Irin Reged and the descendants of Cinedda, which would create Maelgwn Gwynedd and Cadwaladr. That's what they come from. And I wonder, where's the missing link we have? Is there a mutation, kind of, between the Dacian dragon and our 4-legged one? We don't have the whole story, but it's not that far of a leap, really. And we have all the coincidences before and after. And I think there's a good argument for saying that our flag's dragon does originally, ultimately come from the Dacian regions, or Scythians, but the changes happened here in Britain. These areas in present-day Cumbria in which they were are the cradle of the kingdom of Reged, and Irian Reged, and I don't think that's a coincidence. They would have been fighting in kind of like cavalry squadrons. And that's the exact formation that we have of what we were doing in our earliest poetry. Spears and horses. That was how we were fighting. This was Roman in style, and that's no coincidence that this Dacian cohort was of that style, and that we have our dragon in this exact region, most likely emerging. And along this west-northwest region of Britain is where this inheritance of the Red Dragon is first pronouncing itself. Because that family of Maelgwn Gwynedd, Cadwaladr, they came down from that region of the world. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did like it, leave a like or comment. You can buy me a coffee or join me on Patreon, which is a way to contribute to the growth of this channel. And here are my Patrons on the screen now. Many thanks for your contribution. We'll see you in the next episode as we get in the Welsh history series to the Age of Revolutions.